Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Polymer Clay. As you can see, we are live once again, but if you're watching on the recorded video on PS4, which will be coming later this month or next month, because we're nearly at the end of June, we're getting into July, which is getting more summery, so there'll be more Polymer Clay coming, a little bit more summery, but I'll leave that until towards the end of the video. But today we're going to be painting the Blue Angel. I did think maybe of using sort of a larger size of paintbrush, but to do the larger sort of areas, but I thought to myself, no, we'll keep with what we already know, and that is my, which you can't see, my paintbrushes, my little ones. If you aren't recognized by the character, this is what I drew 2 years ago now. The original character, my original character, or my OC, which we've drawn. We've done it in multiple different ways. I think we definitely have made him in VR, but we never did make the set of wings, and I never did make a Polymer Clay version of him. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing today. We've got some more playlists to be listened to in the background as always. But if you've got one that you want me to listen to, or you want for future ones, you can let me know in the comments down below. I know we've got there back again with Abigail Jackson to hopefully keep the chat going as always. But hello and welcome to the stream. I'm going to be sort of not talking too much today. I really want to get the first coat down, so then I can drive it and then offline. Maybe tomorrow come back and do the second layer, because I know it's going to take at least 2 to 3 hours. So if you guys are ready for an episode of audiobook in the background, or you have your own, you can let me know. Again, my name once again is Blut084, BLUT084, and this is Polymer Clay Blue Angel, or Blue Angel, or whatever you want to call them, because I still haven't decided on the name. We have got Blue Angels in GTA for the biker crew. Kind of came from that, but it's got lots of history. I ain't going to get onto it now, because I want to get some layer of paint on. Let's get some audiobook going and mix some paint, and let's get to doing.
Gabriel Garcia Marquez, a very old man with enormous wings, a tale for children. On the third day of rain, they had killed so many crabs inside the house that Pelayo had to cross his drenched courtyard and throw them
little and small,
because the newborn child had a temperature all night, and they thought it was due to the stench.
Most of these got PVA glow from the Halloween times, so it looks like we're going to have to buy them on the next Amazon buy. If you don't remember, or you haven't seen what we bought for paint this time, there is a video available, a little blog, if you want to go check out.
After throwing away the crab, it was hard for him to see what it was that was moving and groaning in the rear of the courtyard. He had to go very close to see that it was an old man, a very old man.
All of the creations and any of the streams are available for sale, but they will be easier to find as soon as I've got the website sorted out, or at least somewhere you can go and browse instead of having to look for all the videos. If you want to check out the videos, check out the Creation Station playlist.
They both looked at the fallen body with mute stupor. He was dressed like a rag picker.
Unless you're watching on PS4 edit, then all of this is sped up, unfortunately. Then I put a little bit of music over that. Generally it sucks, but if you've got a way of, if you've got any USBs or anything like that, or you can download music that you've created and directly send it to a PS4, then ding! But I don't think there's a way of doing that. I have asked. Ding! But I don't think there's a way of doing that. I have asked other creators in the past. Paint. Right, we need the box of paint.
He answered in an incomprehensible dialect with a strong sailor's voice. That was how they skipped over the inconvenience.
And we got some more Polymer Clay as well.
Polymer Clay. And yet they called him a laser woman who knew everything about life and death to see him.
We want to know about all the different kinds of ways of using Polymer Clay. Check out the other live streams. We need white paint. Always need white paint. We'll definitely need blue paint, because the picture kind of tells you there. We're going to be using a lot of blue and a lot of yellow. Maybe a little bit of brown. Different
Against the
shades.
judgment of the wise neighbor.
Could mix a bit of green in there as well for the clothing, maybe. I think I've drawn in with tilt skin before, where it's more of a like a greeny but very still blue. We could use some of that. A bit of red, change the sash up a bit. I know purple. You can't even see the box, but you can on the other PS4. So definitely check out for other views and what I can do. Orange, definitely not. Then again, the orange can make gold. I don't know. We'll leave them in the box. But one thing came with the actual good thing that came with this box of paint, which is brown. I never have brown, and I can never mix it properly. Never. Brown. Best thing I didn't know I bought. And good old black. We need that for darkening anything up, because sometimes it isn't dark enough, or you want that colour that you've mixed or made a bit darker. You want to add a little bit of black.
The simplest among them thought that he should be named the mayor of the world. Others, sterner minds,
I think we'll start with a darker tone for the first layer.
Some visionaries hoped that he could be put
And,
in order to implant
get on from there, I think. Let's get that in frame. But I'm on my little box, because I'm not on the don't use the plastic sheet, because there's no point. There's nothing going to be sticking to it.
Standing by the wire,
So using the box a little bit elevated, because I find it hurts my back if I'm sitting here for too long, and I'm having to lean down as well as trying to get into different things. So I raise the creation or character that I'm painting. I've learned from making so many.
Alien to the impertinences of the world, he only lifted his antiquarian eyes and murmured something in his dialect. Father Gonzaga went into the chicken coop and said, "Good morning," in Latin. The parish priest had his first suspicion of an impostor when he saw that he did not understand the language of God or know how to greet his ministers. Then he noticed that seeing close up he was much too human.
Because of
An
tubes.
unbearable smell of the outdoors.
Where should we start? Should we start with the wings, or should we start with the clothing, the underneath?
By terrestrial wings, and nothing about him measured up to the proud dignity of angels. Then he came out of the chicken coop, and in a brief sermon,
The wings are going to take a lot. I'm going to have to get a load of pokies in around the back as well. So
he reminded them that the devil had the bad habit of making use of carnival tricks in order to
see what blue.
confuse the
Let's have a little square of blue
He
first.
argued that if wings were not the essential element in determining the difference between a hawk and an airplane, they were even less so in the recognition of angels. Nevertheless, he promised to write a letter to his bishop so that the latter would write to his primate, so that the latter would write to the supreme pontiff in order to get the final verdict from the highest courts. His prudence fell on sterile hearts. The news of the captive angel spread with such rapidity that after a few hours the court got into the bustle of the marketplace, and they had to call in troops to fix bayonets to disperse the mob that was about to knock the house down. Elisenda, her spine all twisted from
Bloody ages since I've had actual just black paint. One of the best things I can have, other than brown, is a dark tone. That's what I'm looking for.
A traveling carnival arrived.
Sometimes you just don't have it.
Who buzzed over the crowd several times, but no one paid any attention to him.
Green. I like red, but red is somebody else's colour.
Rather, those of the side reel bats.
You all know that
It
is.
was
And that is going to be my next creation in polymer clay, because doing this one is really giving me a bug to make bigger creations.
A Portuguese man who couldn't sleep because the noise of the stars disturbed him. A sleepwalker who got up at night to undo the things he had done while awake, and many others with less serious ailments. In the midst of that shipwreck, disorder that made the earth tremble,
Maybe a little bit of
Claudio and
orange.
Lucinda were
There's
happy
a dark
to
tone
In
underneath.
less than a week, they crammed the room.
So I'm going to give it 2 tones. Really try and make it more than just, oh, that's painted yellow and that's painted blue. More sort of tones and sort of where it will be darker, put it a little bit more dark. Kind of like you would see of me shading it, as such. Shading the, I don't know what the actual technical word of it, but shading the sculpture. Feather, I don't know, there's a polymer clay artist I watch, but I don't really understand what it means. Wet your brush, where's your brush?
They never found out whether it was because he was an angel or because he was an old man that in the end he ate nothing but eggplant mush. His only
Eggplant mush.
supernatural virtue seemed to be patience. Especially during the first days, when the hens pecked at him, searching for the stellar parasites that proliferated in flings, and the cripples pulled out feathers to touch their defective parts with, and even the most merciful threw stones at him, trying to get into their eyes so they could see him.
Just have a test of the colours, see what they look like together.
They succeeded in arousing him
Start
was when
with
they
a little
burned
bit
his
of nothing.
sides with iron for branding
And
steers.
we,
For he had been
then we'll start with
motionless for
blue.
many hours that they had thought he was dead.
that was the first colour I took
He
the
woke up
brush
and
into
started
afterwards,
ranting in
like a
Germanic
dumbass.
language and with tears in his eyes. He
But
flapped his
I
wings
can work with this blue
which brought on the
and
whirlwind
have
and
maybe
stones
just
and
the
lunar
skin,
dust and a gale of panic
because his
that
skin is
dropped
blue,
six
jacket
feet
is
as
blue,
rolled.
but darker blue.
Although
We
many
could
thought
do
that his
the
reaction
skin
had been
first,
more
like we started with
rage
the,
than
when we first started the
pain.
sculpture over the first sculpture. If you don't remember, was actually underneath this as the core or the armature is an actual Spider-Man figure doing a Spider-Man pose. Hand fell off, and I was like, I can fix that hand. Then I thought to myself, wait, that's a pretty decent hand. Do you know what? I'll try and make something over the top of it. And voila, Blue Angel.
But the man from Rome showed no sense of urgency. And they spent their time pounding out as the prisoner
Alexa.
unable.
Set me an hour's timer, please.
Third timer, 1 hour, starting now.
Because there's another
Those
two
eager
set
letters
already.
would have come and gone until the end
For
of time if a providential event had not put
PlayStation.
an end to the priest's tribulations. It so happened that during those days, among so many other carnival attractions, there arrived in
Blue.
town the traveling show of the
Dabba-dee.
woman who had been changed into a
Dabba-doo.
spider for having disobeyed her parents.
I'll wash that
The
out.
mission to see her was not only
Give that a wash.
but
I need some towel. Give me the wait a moment or two. I need to get a towel.
Ding, ding, ding. Up and down so that no one would ever doubt the truth of her horror. She was a frightful tarantula, the size of a ram and with the head of a sad maiden. What was most heartrending, however, was not her outlandish shape, but the sincere affliction with which she was her misfortune. While still practically a child, she had sneaked out of her
Because I
parents'
can't be
house
asked using the towel and ruin it.
coming back to the woods after having danced
And this is a
all night
child's
without
sock that no longer needs it. So it's going to be washed with. There we go.
Her only nourishment came from the meatballs that charitable souls chose to toss into her mouth. A spectacle like that, with such a fearful lesson, was bound to defeat
Want
without
to
even trying
put
that of a
on
haughty
that.
angel
So kind
who
of
scarcely
thin
deigned
this
to look at
brush
mortals.
that I need.
Besides, the few miracles
So yeah, going over that red, the hand on the red's going to be, I think, a bit of the job. So we'll start there with a lighter blue, which I've made here. And again, do I want to make it a little bit darker? No. We'll stay with light. Sometimes I give these polymer clay a first coat of white, then paint it over the colour itself, and then I have to repaint it over again. So I'm going to just sort of go on with the first colour and then recolour everything after that. I'm going to get you out of the way because his staff is removable. You can also hold other things like this thing I made. Bloody, I think it was like the actual very first thing I ever made was a paintbrush. And he also holds that. Just other things. I've tried to make him hold the hammer. Again, one of the things that I've made multiples of these for giveaways in the past. And can't hold that as well. So yeah. It'll be 15 minutes. Alexa, stop. Right, get it out of the way, because that's what I was doing. Go over there. Please over there. Thank you. Hey, can you see that? You can't see that.
Still hung everywhere like a ghost and was turning the new house into an old one. At first, when the child learned to walk, they were careful that he not get too close to the chicken coop. But then they began to raise their ears and got used to the smell.
The Spider-Man figurine underneath was the actual first first figurine made out of, what was it made out of? Plaster Paris. In one of those kits that you used to buy and mix plaster Paris and then paint it.
The doctor who took care of the child couldn't resist the temptation to listen to the
Now I'll clean it and learn how to paint it. I'm thinking maybe I should have put a brush coat on it. But this is acrylic paint and not watercolour, so I can actually move it around and it won't disappear from where I spot it.
men
Oh, look at
didn't
that.
understand why other men didn't have them too.
In fact, we're going to go all the way around that.
When the child began school, it had
Not
been
care,
time since the sun
this
and
the
rain
first
had caused the collapse of the chicken coop. The angel went dragging himself about here and there like a stray, dying man. They would drive him out of the bedroom with a broom and a moment later find him in the kitchen.
Bed's not
He
gonna
seemed to be in
get
so many places at the same time that they grew to
skin
think
is
that he was
going blue.
duplicated, that he was reproducing himself all through the house, and the exasperated and unhinged Elisenda shouted that it was awful living
Get him
in
be
that hell
underneath.
full of danger. He could scarcely eat, and his antiquarian eyes had also become so foggy that he went about bumping into posts. All he had left were the bare cannulae of his last feathers. Pelayo threw a blanket over him and extended him the charity of letting him sleep in the shed, and only then did they
Well,
notice that
the
he had a
snap off.
temperature at night and was delirious with tongue twisters of an old Norwegian. That was one of the few times they became alarmed, for they thought he was going to die, and not even the wise neighbor woman had been able to tell
I'll
them what to
do.
do.
I'll
with
do.
their
I'll
angel.
do.
And yet he not only
Well, I'm
survived his worst winter, but seemed improved with the first sunny
Cough.
days. He remained motionless for several days in the farthest corner of the courtyard, where no one would see him, and at the beginning of December some large, stiff feathers began to grow on his wings, the feathers of a scarecrow, which looked more like another misfortune or decrepitude. But he must have known the reason for those changes, for he was quite careful. That
Is
no one
the
should
playlist
notice
coming in
him,
for you,
and
everybody, in the chat?
that he
Or is it
felt
just
framed
you,
with
my darling
One
Abigail?
morning, Elisenda was cutting some bunches of onions for lunch when a wind that seemed to come from
Oh.
behind the sea blew into the kitchen. And then she went to the window and caught the angel in his first attempts at flight.
You don't hear that at all.
They were so clumsy that his fingernails opened a furrow in the vegetable patch, and he was on the point of knocking the shed down with the ungainly flapping that slipped on the line and couldn't get a grip on the air. But he did manage to gain altitude. Elisenda let out a sigh of relief for herself and for him when he saw him pass over the last houses, holding himself up in some way with the risky flapping of a senile vulture. She kept watching him even when she was through cutting the onions, and she kept on watching until it was no longer possible for her to see him,
Cutting the
because then he
onions.
was no longer an annoyance in her life, but an imaginary dot on the horizon, the sea.
Oh, damn. Adverts. No, thank you. Go away. Bye-bye. Ooh, no.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Balkaisel.
That's nice.
Let's talk about A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings, a
Okay.
short story by Gabriel Garcia
Okay.
Marquez.
This
It's a very
is a bit
confusing
the same.
story.
Okay, the same song. Same song. Same thing again. Wow, that's a bit boring and tedious. Damn. What else should we listen to then? Wings of Fire by Dr. something or other? Dr. APJ. Let's play that. Of course. I made a cat advert first. I forget that.
Wings of Fire, अग्नि की उड़ान, परिचय।
Well, I hope you understand that language because I
हुई
don't.
है जब देश की संप्रभुता को बनाए रखने और उनकी सुरक्षा को और मजबूत बनाने के लिए चल रहे
Damn it.
तकनीकी प्रयासों को लेकर दुनिया में कई राष्ट्र सवाल उठा रहे हैं।
Can't even see what I'm doing. Have a look at it. Have a look at that while I try and find something to list.
किसी न किसी मुद्दे
Have wings of a dragon. Blah. Wings of a dragon. Wings of a dragon. Wings of a dragon. More wings of a dragon. Wings, wings, wings. Okay, we'll have to type in more than just audiobook wings into the search engine to find something more. I think, oh, hell, what do you think? Yeah. Wings of a demon. That's pretty good. What was that? What was that you sent me? I can't find it, and I can't. When I tap the link and ask for looking for it again to continue what we listened to, what was it called? Can you remember? Because I can't. I can not. Can. Can I even find it? Can I not? Can't do it. No good. Can't find it. No, where it has or where it has. Or let's say what it was. I looked for it on farm, but didn't. Couldn't find it. Couldn't find it at all. Nope. The walls then were gone. Undo. How we're going. Alright, okay, well that's probably pretty boring for twos. Demon. Should we have the demon dentist? Would everybody in chat like to have us the thumbs up? Give me a like for the demon dentist. No thumb downs today. Or should we just have a bloody comic? No, I cannot find anything good. No good. The Time, the Demons Before the End book, part 1. Look
The
at that.
Time of Demons, written by Catherine Meyer Griffin, narrated by Wendy Tremont King.
Wendy, darling, this better be a good one.
Chapter 1. Cassandra and Johnny. Why are you looking at me that way? The man asked, smiling. Cassandra Greystone's gaze took in the maroon shirt, shiny golden hair, and sleepy eyes. As the man stood a few feet away from her, he had a charming way about him, too, and would have been the type of man she had been attracted to under normal circumstances. But those were the key words. Under normal circumstances. She looked away, yet as hard as she tried, her face must have shown her feelings of dread. It must have given away a hint of the truth she'd already glimpsed, somewhere deep behind her eyes. The man was going to die very soon. Sorry, didn't mean anything by it. I thought you were someone I knew, that's all. She used that line a lot. It usually worked. She shrugged and flashed the man an apologetic smile in the dimness of the lounge. I am, kinda. I've been here the last 3 Fridays. I just wanted to tell you how much I enjoy listening to you and your brother sing. There was still a smile on his lips. You two have such lovely harmonies. And your brother's original songs are really good. Man, he can play that guitar. She felt flattered and sad for the man all at once. Thank you. I'll tell him what you said. Johnny loves compliments. Her eyes scanned the room. No Johnny. He's around here somewhere. Probably talking to someone or in the restroom. But I'll tell him you liked his songs. You guys rock. Forcing out a smile, she replied. Thank you. Appreciate you saying so. We can use all the fans we can get. She closed her brother's guitar case, snapped the locks, then wrapped the cord around his microphone and placed it in the box with the other equipment. She wished the man would go away, leave her alone. He'd brushed up against her, and she knew he was a walking dead person. And, as always, there was nothing she could do to help him. Oh, yeah, she'd learned to keep her mouth shut. People didn't want to know they were going to die, when or how, though she never saw every last tiny detail. People freaked out or thought she was some crazy woman. Having been on the receiving end of that sour tune once too often, she had learned her lesson. She'd been called everything from a bitch to a witch. Once, someone had even slugged her. Don't ever tell them what you see. Don't ever tell them anything. Oh, she'd learned. How long have you two been playing together? Since we were kids. They'd caterwauled on the swing set in the backyard from the time she was 10 or so, later in high school talent shows, and out in public for money as soon as they were old enough to drive. Started with folk music, contemporary pop and rock, tossed in a little of the new country and bluegrass for spice. At 18, Johnny began to write songs, and he taught her how to play guitar, something he'd picked up from his friends in the school band.
You bit blue?
He could listen to a
Blue,
song on the radio,
blue.
and in minutes
blue,
would be able
blue,
to play
blue.
it. She had a natural ear for harmony, and their singing careers were born. Lately, for some reason neither of them could explain, They'd taken to throwing in their own arrangements of old-time gospel melodies, and Johnny had begun to write songs that were definitely spiritual, which wasn't so unusual since they were both Christians. Well, I just wanted to tell you how much I like you two. Your voices sound like they belong together. Like angels. Cassandra looked directly at the man for the first time. I even like your brother's lame jokes. The man chuckled. At least someone does. On stage, Johnny told what she considered to be tasteless little anecdotes, and she was always making fun of him for it. But the crowd ate up their ribbing each other, so they'd kept both in the act. He can sure make the crowd laugh, and your ballads make them cry. She felt her face turning red. Unlike her brother, she had a hard time accepting praise of any sort. Thank you? Oh, she wished he would go away. She didn't want to know him. She'd only feel worse later. Someday, I bet you two are going to be rich and famous. I know it. She shrugged. From your mouth to fate's ears. But it really doesn't matter to us. We are happy the way things are. We get to do what we love, and we get paid for it. Oh, sure. When they'd been kids, they dreamed of record deals, of being filthy rich, and thought that was the road to happiness. But that was before the fire. Things changed after that. Now, merely being together, being with their aunt and uncle, and singing for their supper, rent, and utilities were all they wanted. But everyone needs money. He shoved a $20 bill at her. Here, before I go, I wanted to give you your tip in person. 10 for both of you. No, you don't need to do that. Cassandra tried to give the 20 back, but the man refused it with a shake of his head. Nah, it's for you. I was really down tonight. Too much bad stuff happening in my life these days. Your music's really cheered me up. Please take it. She hesitated a second. He seemed adamant and wasn't going to be talked out of it. All right. Again, thank you. Johnny says thank you too. Of course, Johnny would. He forever needed money because maybe their pay wasn't quite enough to cover all their living expenses, but tips helped, and they lived simply, or she did anyway. She rented the upstairs flat of her aunt and uncle's duplex that faced Forest Park, ridiculously cheap. But living cheaply wasn't her brother's thing. Johnny was good at living high on the hog, even when he didn't have the hog, and couldn't stay on a budget if he were glued to it. He insisted on keeping his own apartment on the other side of town instead of living with the rest of the family. Said he wanted to go home to his own space at the end of the day. 5 months ago, he'd gotten this bug up his butt about being independent and being his own man. Ha! A man in debt is what he was. His cupboards were bare, and he mooched most of his meals off his friends and family. She often had to lend him money. Sometimes Cassandra thought he lived by himself because Aunt Ellie was sick, and he didn't want to be in the middle of it, didn't want to be bothered. Then she'd feel guilty for thinking that. Johnny had a big heart. He liked his solitude, or so she kept telling herself. She had a roomy apartment, but he'd had to live on the first floor with the old ones. So she didn't blame him. Ellie could be difficult lately. Well, it's been nice chatting with you, the man said. I can see you're busy, so I'll be going. Say hi to your brother for me. I will. See you next Friday. We'll be here. The man, with the invisible target on his face, walked away into the thinning crowd. She took one last glance and saw his bright shirt disappear through the door into the night. With a sigh, she packed her guitar in its case, breathed in the deep, polished scent of wood, and looked around for her brother. Time to go home. He was probably outside stealing the smoke, knowing she'd give him hell if she saw him with one in his hand. The lights were dim. It helped hide the shabbiness. The red carpet lounge wasn't special in any way, except for Maury, a generous man who treated everyone like a friend, who ran the place, and that she and her brother had been singing there 3 nights a week for the last 5 months. The money was better than some places. They'd done a lot worse over their careers, if a person could call lounge singing a career. She'd never planned on singing in bars as a living, but life was strange. A person did what a person had to do to survive. It was as if she'd been waiting for her real life to begin, and it just never had. Not so far, anyway. College hadn't appealed to her. Tests made her sick to her stomach, and she'd found nothing else that captured her passion like music. Then again, she and Johnny weren't office types. They'd have trouble punching in anywhere at 8 a.m., being locked up in tight cubicles, or taking orders. Free spirits that they were. Her eyes searched for her brother, anxious to get home and make sure Aunt Ellie and Uncle George were all right. Just a funny feeling she had. They'd raised her and Johnny since she'd been 9 and Johnny 7, since the fire that had killed the rest of their family 20 years ago. Once, she had 3 sisters and 3 brothers, and a mother and a father she'd adored. After the fire ravaged their home and took most of them, all she had left was Johnny, and burn scars on her face and leg to remind her of that night, as if she could ever forget. After the fire, her childless aunt and uncle, her father's much older brother, had taken them in, loved and raised them without a look back. Now it was her and Johnny's turn to take care of them. They were getting old, and though George had his own medical problems, Ellie was becoming more befuddled every day. It affected all of them. George and Ellie were more like grandparents, with the needs of aging grandparents. They were forgetful, had a basket of pills to take each day, and their fragile bodies were home to mysterious aches and pains. They didn't like their routine changed. George's eyes gave him trouble, so he wasn't driving anymore, and Ellie was too out of it most of the time to trust behind the wheel. Doctor visits, shopping, and errands had fallen to Johnny and her, mostly her. She didn't mind taking care of them. All in all, it was a good life, except for the sad memories of her dead family, and her little curse of seeing things she didn't want to see, and knowing things she didn't want to know. She hated it when she looked at a face, and another visage leaped through skin and bones, and just for a heartbeat, showed her something hideous. That talent had only begun the last few weeks, and it had her more upset than she'd admit. It made her doubt her sanity, made her wonder if she was delusional. Yesterday, she'd asked her uncle if insanity ran in the family, and he'd laughed. Not that I know of, but hey, I never did meet any of your mother's side. Great. Her brother was coming towards her, smelling like cigarette smoke and looking tired. Cassie, you ready to call it a night? All packed up and heading for the door. Just waited to say bye. You smell like smoke, Johnny. She noticed he ignored her critical observation and the unintentional double meaning. They both knew there was more than one kind of smoke. Glad you waited, sis, because I need to hitch a ride home with you. The junk heap won't start again. I think it's the battery. Probably needs a new one. You need to get yourself a new car, brother. One that doesn't break down every other day. Cassandra grabbed her purse and her guitar, a 6-string acoustic guild. It had been her father's, had miraculously escaped the flames of her childhood home, and was precious to her. She remembered, as a little girl, her father picking around on it. He'd never been real good, but he'd be proud of them now. She didn't leave her instrument at the bar overnight. It was worth too much to her to chance it being stolen. Tell me about it, but you know I don't have the cash for a new ride. Tomorrow, I'll see what it'd take to patch it up again. Hopefully, I can get a few more months out of it. You've been jury-rigging that old Skyhawk for years. It's 16 years old, for heaven's sake, Johnny. Yeah, but you know me. I can't bear to let go of things. Might have something to do with the fire and losing everything he ever had when he was young. Sometimes there's nothing else to do but let go. That car's beyond fixing. It's ready for the junkyard. Nah, it's not. You'll see. She sighed. She handed him the 20 she'd been given earlier, glad to get rid of it. Here, a tip. Put it towards the new battery. Thanks, sis. Not one to turn down a gift, he pocketed the bill without bothering to ask who it came from. Money was money to him. Okay, come on, I'll drop you off. Good night, all. Johnny spread his fingers in an arc as they walked out. A couple of the regulars, still nursing their last drinks, smiled or returned the wave. "Night, Maury. See you tomorrow," Cassandra told her boss. "Tomorrow, kids," Maury muttered, propped up behind the bar, his head cradled in his heavy arms. He didn't look up when they went out the door. He told her earlier he'd helped a friend move that day and was exhausted. The world was hushed. It was the middle of the night, yet the moon's lopsided grin cast a pearly shimmer over the empty streets and buildings around them. She used to love this time of night before the strange things began to happen to her. "Phew," Cassandra said. "It's still like an oven out here. I'm sweating already." And she hated sweating. It ruined her good clothes. "I'll be glad to get home and bask in my air conditioning. It's normal for July, though. Summer in St. Louis, don't you love it? Even the storms haven't broken the heat wave. At least it isn't raining, at the moment anyway. One good thing. I've had about enough of those weird storms. Rain's too heavy, wind's too fierce, too much lightning. It has been sort of freaky, hasn't it? I'll say." Johnny stared upwards, as if he were afraid a storm would come out of nowhere and attack them by surprise. Then his eyes went to a commotion down the road from the bar. Cassandra looked too. She couldn't help it. Sirens screeched, and flashing lights drew up to the crowd of people on the sidewalk. "Wonder what's going on down there?" Johnny craned his neck. "Looks like a meat wagon." "Looks like it. Come on, let's go." Turning her head, she hurried towards the car. Johnny straggled behind her, because as usual he was gawking at the hubbub, wanting to know what was going on. He should have been a vulture, the way he was drawn to disasters. "What's going on down there? Aren't we going to go see what's happened?" Johnny demanded, not getting in the car. The night breeze ruffled his long hair, his face in silhouette. "Someone got hit by a car, that's what," she snapped, a bit too sharply. "Let's go. It's really late and I'm really tired." "Hold on a second. I'm going to see. Don't leave without me." Johnny strode down the street towards the crowd, and she had no choice but to traipse after him like some groupie. She dragged her feet on purpose, not wanting to see what she knew she was going to see. Since the fire, her brother had had a morbid fascination with accidents, death, and she was sick of it. She didn't want to go down there. She didn't want to see anything. It'd live in her memory for days like a bad taste. No, it was better not to look. Better not to know. Johnny was the only one who knew that she saw death before it happened, which made his fascination in horrific events and other people's demises even more of an irritation. She could have kicked him for dragging her to the accident scene, yet she couldn't stop him. She caught up as he stood by the ambulance watching the paramedics load the victim into the back. The crowd surged closer to see more. "What happened?" Johnny asked the paramedic nearest him. "Hit and run. Car got him as he was crossing the street here." "How is he?" "Guy's dead. He bled out before we could get to him, poor sucker." The man shook his head, shoved the gurney completely in and closed the doors. To him, it was just another pickup in a long night. Just another corpse. In the interior lights before the gurney disappeared, Cassandra glimpsed the maroon shirt peeking out from under the sheet. Sorrow nipped at her for a moment and ebbed away. "I'm not responsible. I can never stop it. God knows I've tried so many times, but it never makes any difference what I do. They always died. Simple as that. She was only a spectator." "Don't." She bit her lip to keep it from trembling. "Start blaming yourself again. I should have done something, said something. Stop it." The way she'd come to see it, if she'd wanted to prevent the deaths, she'd have to either convince the victims they were going to die, as if that would ever work, or tail them and physically try to save them in one way or another. Both impossibilities. It'd take all of her time, and she'd have to give up her life as she knew it. If she could even save them, she didn't think so. And if she began stalking strangers all over town, like a berserk PI. People wouldn't understand. Heck, they thought she was weird enough the way it was. Not having a regular job, singing all night and sleeping most of the day. Everyone knew musicians were crazy. Why, she asked God, had she been given such an insight, and what was she supposed to do with it? But he never answered. Not caring if her brother followed or not, Cassandra walked to her car, got in, slammed the door shut, and stuck the key in. The engine roared to life as Johnny, breathing hard, slid into the passenger seat. She pushed down hard on the accelerator. Sorry. Her brother spoke contritely and fell quiet for a block or two, and as she knew he would, then rattled on. When I got to the ambulance, they were covering up the dude who got hit. He was in the bar tonight. I saw him talking to him. She knew what he was going to ask next. Don't ask it, she growled softly. You don't want to know. Johnny didn't push it. It meant she didn't have to knock him in the head. They rode the rest of the way in silence. She dropped him off at his apartment and 5 miles later pulled into the driveway below her flat. Being it was after 2 a.m, her aunt and uncle's lower apartment had no lights on. Please, Aunt Ellie, she murmured, stay in bed tonight. Don't go wandering out in the yard again. The night before, her aunt had snuck out of the house, and Uncle George had had a heck of a time finding her. Good thing he got her back in the house when he did, because later, one of those fierce storms had blown in. It would have been awful if Ellie had been out in it. Time to have her aunt checked out again by her doctor. The old dear forgot things and took off, getting lost more often all the time. That wasn't normal. Aunt Ellie was getting worse. Yet, George believed he could still take care of her. All he had to do was try harder. Yeah, sure. He was in denial big time. Truth was, Ellie was becoming unmanageable, and Uncle George wasn't spry enough to keep up with her, much less keep her corralled. Cassandra was still fretting about her aunt's strange behavior and her uncle's failing health, and what she was going to do about it all when she bumped into the man. Only, he wasn't a man. When her body came into contact with his, she knew something was wrong immediately. Images and feelings she couldn't understand rushed into her head, like vignettes from a horror movie, of dripping blood, dead bodies, and creatures that morphed into other creatures. What was that about? Caught off guard and overwhelmed by the images, she blurted out, "What are you? You're not a remnant, but you aren't human either." The man, who wasn't a man, spun around and disappeared into the night's shadows. Had she completely and finally lost her mind? Now she was bumping into and seeing ghosts too. Like a few nights earlier, she'd been driving past a cemetery on her way to work and saw this smoky wraith-like thing resembling a woman flitting around a fresh grave's headstone. The apparition, floating beneath a willow tree,
There's a
had
little tail
stared
there.
through the twilight and wiggled pasty fingers at her, wanting her to come nearer.
But what do you think of the blue?
Car onto the shoulder of the road, her body trembling. An eerie, cold sensation sank
Again,
into
it's the
pit of her
first coat.
stomach as she
I might,
got out of the car.
Just do one coat because
What
we're
did it
at
want?
50. Yeah, sorry,
Well,
we're
when
at
she stomped
43
up to
minutes
the ring,
already. So I'm going to try and
It
get down the
just
first coat.
wickedly smiled
Maybe come
at
back
her
tomorrow
and evaporated into the ground mist as
and do the second
slipping
coat
back into its grave.
because then I've got 50
It
minutes
was
to
the
edit
third
and
time
then
that week
another
something unearthly
edit
had happened,
after that.
but then refused to speak.
But I'll
to
get
her
all the
in a
base coats down.
graveyard.
Like I'll
It
get
was
some,
giving
maybe
her
get
the
some yellow on here as well.
This has got to stop. Now, on top of everything, she was seeing spooks. Sheesh. What next? Vampires? Shaking her head, she went around to the rear of the house and climbed the steps to her rooms, wishing she'd seen the direction the man had been coming from when he'd stumbled into her. Wishing she'd gotten a better look at him. She wished the encounter had never happened so close to her home. Pushing the incident out of her head wasn't as easy as she thought it would be. The uneasiness the man had left behind, the sharp whiff of evil that clung to him, wouldn't go away. She knew evil when she saw or was around it. Another side effect of her curse. It was bad enough she could see death coming. Why was she also seeing these other things? She must be losing it. Big time. Slipping inside, she locked the door behind her, dropped her guitar and purse on the sofa, and peered out the window between the blinds. The moonlight showed her there was no one outside. The yard and street in front of the house were vacant. Across the road, the familiar outlines of the park's trees swayed in the night breezes. Nothing was out there that didn't belong. Her fingers drew back from the blinds as she sighed. She was home, safe. She liked her apartment with its private rear entrance. Her aunt and uncle lived below her and were close enough to keep an eye on. The city, noisy and vibrant, surrounded her. Stores and theaters were within walking distance. Lush and beautiful Forest Park sprawled before her. She could meander in the woods under the shade trees or visit the zoo animals on sunny days, though there hadn't been many of those lately. A frown settled on her lips. So far, it had been the stormiest spring and summer she'd ever seen, with horrendous heat, lightning storms, flooding, and monster tornadoes. The weather had been exceptionally destructive. So unusual. She switched on the light and slumped down on the couch. Shutting her eyes, she ran her fingers across the slick fabric. Great couch. It had a bed inside, too. It was almost like new, though she found it at an estate sale a year ago and had gotten it dirt cheap. How she loved a bargain. She looked around her flat with a smug smile. Spacious for a top floor, it had a living room, kitchen, bath, 2 bedrooms, and a walk-in storage closet that was actually large enough to double in a pinch for a small room. She'd worked hard to make the flat comfortable. Thrift store purchases aside, it did look nice. Fluffy rugs on the floors and original paintings of angels and pastoral scenery in muted colors hung on the walls. The paintings hadn't cost much either. Some of her friends were artists, and some were mystics, or crackpots, as her uncle affectionately called them. One of those crackpots, Sarah, was her best friend. She told fortunes and read tarot cards for a living, and wasn't too bad at either. Problem was, Sarah also thought she was a spirit medium. She'd been performing seances for years, but hadn't heard or seen an actual ghost yet. She believed it would happen any day. It was only a matter of time and patience. Yeah, sure. Wait until she does see a spook. Huh, it'll scare the bejesus out of her, too. What would Sarah have made of that creature out in the street? A grin slipped out. Sarah would have most likely invited it to tea or something, offered to read its cards. Oh, she'd like to be at that reading. The thought made her chuckle. But then, someone else's take on the encounter might not be such a bad idea. What would Sarah think of
I'm
the
going
man
to
who
do the
wasn't
base
really
now,
a man?
green, because I can't really think of a colour for the
Undressing, she took a shower, made hot chocolate, and
called
folded
lizard.
to bed with the cup.
So
couldn't get that
I'm going
strange
to just
man
do the
out
whole
of
thing,
her
the
mind.
whole bottom green,
Her
because
uneasiness wouldn't go away.
the base isn't going to be
Was he out
blue and
there
red.
somewhere
It
watching her?
needs another
He
coat
could
because I'm
be.
obviously getting other colours onto
She had
it.
the sudden
So I'm going to have to colour it at
their
some point. So
paths
may as well
would
just do it
cross
now.
again.
While I wait for that, so I can
She
do
didn't
the
know how she
blue,
knew
sorry,
that
do
she
the
did.
yellow for the wings
Her
afterwards.
eyes went to the scorched crucifix on the wall above her head. The wooden cross had been her mother's, and it would protect her from anything evil out in the night. God would protect her. She finished the cocoa and put her head to the pillow.
Oh,
There was nothing she could do.
as I say and do that, we get to 50 minutes. So give me a second as I will sort out the PS4. So if you are watching that video, see you in a minute. So if you're watching live, just listen, carry on listening and still doing stuff. That's why you watch it live, everybody. Now, Alexa, stop.
Snuggled into the curve of her body. She cuddled the cat to the sound of the rain and allowed herself to drift away, knowing she was safe. Chapter 2. Rainer. Rainer skulked through the shadows that muddied the dark sidewalks. People who rushed by as he passed saw what they wanted to see. A man in sweats or in a business suit with forgettable features they thought they might have known once. They'd forget him a moment after he disappeared into the night. A twirl of mist, an after breeze. They never saw him for what he truly was. He stopped outside the nightclub and slithered up against the entrance wall. Most humans would call him a vampire. They didn't know any better. He was an ancient blood demon. There were no vampires, werewolves, or supernatural beings. No true mass murderers or serial killers either, for that matter. No such things. Only demons. And he was ravenously hungry again.
Okay, right, well, if you're back and you're watching this is just me repainting
Mindless,
and doing more
beyond the
painting.
doors
PlayStation. But,
They were
right,
aware of
okay.
the danger so
Alexa, set me 50 minutes on a timer.
Second timer, 15 minutes.
Starting
now.
It never understands me.
For plague.
Alexa,
His victims would be
set a 50-minute timer, please.
Third timer, 50 minutes. Starting now.
Right, probably got off a million times before. Let's go for another 50 minutes and see if we can get all the colour down. Don't want to get down,
Clenched fists at his side.
which is the
He
base
had
game.
quite the urge to smash something, hurt something. Why wouldn't they stop tormenting him?
Because then we'll come back tomorrow. Maybe give it another coat in the same colour,
Some misty, some clearer.
or as close to it I can get,
Around him. One moment they were there, another they were
and
not.
add the colour and tones and things like that.
Only recently
as I
had
do.
they begun to haunt and follow him. Their remnants, falling into line behind him, must stretch out for miles and miles. He didn't dare look, but could hear their soft and squishy breathing, their zombie-like footsteps as they tracked him from place to place. He could no longer escape them. That had never happened before. Sliding into an entryway, his eyes peering into the gloom, he waited. He'd already fed, but didn't yet want to return to his apartment. When he was in silence, alone, the sentries taunted him with their swift passing, their endless emptiness. The everlasting accumulation of years was driving him insane. That, and waiting for the final battle with humanity to begin. Perhaps it never would. Perhaps all the legends were lies. His kind had no final purpose, no great destiny at all. They simply existed to kill, 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 and be tormented century after century with the futility of their continuation. His dead victims stalked him. The voices in his head tortured him, and his irritability was getting worse. It was a sign. Something big was about to happen. He could feel, sense, and almost smell the carnage, the upheaval coming. The last time he'd felt this way had been the start of a world war. This time, the forewarnings were worse. No amount of warm blood alleviated his discomfort, but he kept moving and killing anyway. It was all he knew. He drank blood until he could drink no more. It didn't help. He shoved the troubling thoughts from his mind. It didn't help. Frustrated, he'd retreat to his lair and pass out until the next night. Then the cycle would begin again. With what he was, he couldn't stay long in one place, couldn't afford to form close ties to anything or anyone. Growing attached was a problem because he never aged. Soon he'd be packing and moving on. Forever alone was the story of his existence. Humans were only for sustenance, and he didn't get along with his kind. They believed he was too soft, and he had enemies everywhere who mustn't find him. Often he questioned why he should go on at all. The melancholy, as he called it, had again captured him. It happened that way. Every few centuries he'd sink into depression, between the highs of basking in the spectacles of a new age and the lows of having done everything so many times he was bored silly. Very little surprised or interested him anymore. I've been among the humans too long. Their passivity
Okay, so we've got yellow.
infected me. He'd thought of ending himself.
Base colour yellow.
As I mentioned, when he knew there were ways, and had been close to doing it many
And I
times.
actually put a little bit
But
orange
something,
just for a base coat layer
lust
because I kind of like the orange,
would beckon him
and I
back
think
at the
it's going to
last
brighten the
moment,
yellow
and he'd
for
go on
like a
until
base
the next
underneath. I'm
melancholy.
going to add sort of
The
mix
truth
these two
was,
together. Maybe I'll
they'd
get a
been coming
lighter
closer and closer together.
orange
He
out-
hated his
after-
wretched
out of
existence.
using the yellow.
A
Of
lone
course,
woman
I've mixed the
her
white
steps
that
wobbly,
I had in
exited
with
the bar
blue,
and
so of
headed
course
for her car.
bugger.
Her
And I've
skin,
used way too much on
glistened
the
with
first go
sweat.
as well.
it must be a sultry
I leave
night.
this to
He
dry.
couldn't feel the
Then again, I
heat.
could probably put this in the fridge
Oh,
because I've got
How
way
he
too much in my
loved to
tray
be able to
here,
feel
guys.
those tactile sensations of warmth
Thinking like
and
child
cold.
paint because I like
How
water
he
shit.
loved to
I was
taste
using it,
anything
but-
blood,
Put that in the fridge, and it won't go
Toasted,
off or it won't
smelled
cure,
like
or
cardboard.
as most
In all
normal
his
people
time,
call
He'd
it.
never experienced
dry.
love or hope, compassion or mercy. He was a killing machine that hated, despaired, and lucky him, could feel physical pain. Some life. The woman had too much to drink. Past her prime, there was no wedding band on her finger, and there was too much makeup smeared on her face. He followed her, spying on her thoughts. She wasn't going home to anyone. No one waited anywhere for her. Ah, what a shame.
No.
His smile mocked.
White. Well,
Her
that's
cat
actually
had
not
died
doing
the
too
week
much of a bad
before.
colour.
Tisk, tisk, too bad.
More of a golden
so
colour,
sad.
which I was looking for.
He listened
Who knew?
to her
Bit
inner
blue.
litany of money and love troubles. It made his head hurt. There was something medically wrong with her heart. She was miserable, a throwaway person. He fumbled at the lock of her car door,
Good job, I got some
coming
more
off
white.
key, and he ready to strike. Then the others of his kind appeared and charged
White
down
gold.
the street towards him, moving as
Gold.
swiftly as starving wolves, scenting fresh prey. To a human's ears, they'd be suspicious noises in the twilight or dark, the shiver of a mortal's blood-soaked skin, barely shadows. But Rayner could see them all four of them, and they'd seen him. He didn't know who they were, hadn't been officially introduced, though he'd spied them around the area a few times. They were younger than he, wild and impetuous, their actions dangerously risky. Show-offs, who didn't play by the old rules. He didn't approve of their behavior. They might have been invisible, but their voices and laughter weren't. And their bloodlust was insatiable, their kills sloppy. They ruined it for the rest of them, alerted the humans to their presence, made it harder for their kind to remain hidden. The pack swooped down, snatched the woman and dragged her into the air, screaming and kicking. They broke her neck. He heard the crack, loud and sharp in the air above, and drained her of blood, passing her around like a communal cup. The woman's broken body was tossed at his feet, an empty husk. Another demon commandment shattered as the shadows sped away. Blood drinkers with half a brain knew that after they fed, they disposed of the leftovers in a woodsy grave or deep ravine where humans wouldn't discover the bodies too easily. All the missing people in the world, well, that's what happened to most of them. Demon snacks. The woman's cries echoed in his head. Most of the young ones were brutal. For them, the hunting and killing were better sport than the feeding. Stealing the humans' lives weren't enough. They had to torture them first. Had he been like that once? He probably had, but it was a long time past. Once, he would have joined the gang for the rest of the night to feed on whatever mortals they came across, and to lord their superiority over the unlucky race. Not tonight. He didn't feel like it. The demons flew over the parking lot and rocketed towards the towering silver arch standing guard before the river. The arch's metal gleamed in the city's lights. Called the Gateway to the West, it was beautiful, graceful and shiny, a marvel of architect fashioned by the very creatures he'd always detested. Had detested. Now, he wasn't so sure. Once, he thought he was a god among them, and that someday the mortals would be extinct, except as food and slaves, and his kind would rule the earth when they won the final battle. It hadn't happened. Eons had passed and the humans had proliferated like termites, had grown stronger over the millennia, and now dominated the world. Now, how had that come to be? How had humans, with their frail bodies, weak minds, and unruly hearts, become masters of the planet? He didn't know, especially since humans were so motivated by emotions. Love, hate, revenge, guilt. So messy. And they didn't have a clue to what was coming. Well, most of them anyway. Something stirred in the bag of bones at his feet, and a translucent being, a wraith-like ghostly thing that appeared to be human but wasn't, escaped the remains and stood up to stare back at him. It smiled and gestured gently with milky hands and gazed upwards as if it saw something he didn't, something exquisitely breathtaking. Its see-through face was full of awe, happiness, and such peace. It glowed. Frozen, Rainer felt an emotion he'd never had before. Amazement. What was this thing, and why was it so blissful? It was dead, after all. The demon couldn't understand what the shimmering creature was trying to say to him, though it wasn't angry or upset. It was so happy. All Rainer could do was watch in astonishment as it drifted upward into the velvet blackness of the vast night sky and vanished, taking all its radiance and his strange emotions with it. The humans would have called that glowing thing a soul. He'd read about souls. It was something humans believed they had that allowed them to live forever in a place called heaven. Live forever, without stealing blood, without killing other beings. Finally being happy? What a pipe dream. Had it really been a soul? No, impossible. He didn't believe in souls. None of his kind did. It was just another myth, a great lie perpetrated by the enemy to enslave their soldiers. But it fit the description of one, if that was what it had been. How strange. Staring up into the sky, the rain began to fall softly and then heavier until the night world was a curtain of water. It washed away the small amount of blood that pooled beneath the woman's corpse, and somehow the pile of skin and bones left behind debris seemed less now. The translucent being must have animated it. Now the body was only a dead thing. Rainer didn't know what to do. No matter how he tried to justify it, seeing that thing come out of the body and rise into the skies had shaken him. He wanted to go home and not think about it. Disturbed, he wasn't hungry any longer. There were no such things as souls. And demons weren't supposed to be able to see them anyway. But he'd seen something. What did it mean? The rain pursued him through the abandoned streets. Steam rose from the sidewalks and wrapped him in a smoky haze. He passed no people, saw no other demons. He was alone. Inside the apartment, he made sure the shades were down and the windows and doors were locked before he went into his room. Barely more than a walk-in closet, which was part of a larger suite. It wasn't much, but didn't cost him a penny. He never paid for anything. He lay on his single bed and let his gaze rove the tiny, bare, and unadorned space with the empty walls. He'd never spruced it up. It was only a place to fritter the day away, in between hunting and slaughtering humans. After a while, the divorced stockbroker who rented the apartment, Shelley something or other, came stumbling in. For some reason, he had no idea why. He'd allowed her to live. She wasn't any trouble, and the ruse helped conceal him. People were used to her living there and asked no questions. She traveled a lot, and her mind was easy to manipulate. As most humans, she didn't believe in supernaturals, so he could hide right in front of her. She'd never seen him, never guessed she was living with a demon. Her hand was on the closet door. "Go away," he silently ordered. She did. It worked every time. Her clothes were strewn all over the apartment because he lived in her closet. Later, the outside door opened and shut. The woman had left again, probably running an errand or going out for a late rendezvous.
There's
She
the
was a restless
orangey,
He wanted to
orangey.
sleep and forget
Very,
the
very,
scenery
very
around
bright
the
orange.
parking lot.
But like I said, I'm going to give it all a second coat, and hopefully that orange will go a bit more yellow on the second coat, because that's what I'm going to be putting on there.
There was a racket outside his room. Someone was
But I
in
really
the
do like this
apartment,
orange as
and
a
it wasn't
bright
showing
colour.
What's her name either?
Trying to go for more
Roscoe?
gold, but I couldn't quite
Someone
get that.
yelled, and malicious laughter came through the door at him. There were the mournful cries of a human child. Damn, how did they find me? Raynor growled. He yanked the door open. The demons from outside the bar who'd taken his meal were in the apartment, and they'd brought a captive, cowering in a corner, terrified. Was a red-headed
It's
demon.
15 minutes. Alexa, stop.
We brought him for you, Raynor. A gift, said the demon nearest him. It wore the empty face of a 20-year-old mortal with greasy flaxen hair, and was dressed in leather from head to toe. In its ears were earrings, and in its nose a ring. Skin was as white as a bottle of milk. It looked like the perfect movie vampire. Oh, the young ones, they liked their little jokes. To make up for stealing that woman earlier. Sorry we got carried away. You know how it is when the hunger hits. Raynor didn't believe they were sorry for what they'd done, for anything they did. They were there to gauge his strength so they could taunt him, try to vanquish him. The young ones were forever trying to depose of the old ones. Doing so carved vivid notches on their belts and gave them power and higher standing in the demon world. Huh, they had much to learn. But Raynor wasn't worried. They didn't know who they were dealing with. They were more a nuisance than a threat, disturbing his tranquility and reminding him of being stupidly young. He didn't like to remember those days and didn't appreciate those who made him remember. Please, let me go, the child begged. I won't tell anyone what happened to me. That you took me, I promise. Blood dripped from the boy's nose, and bruises darkened his tiny face. His fragile body was plastered against the wall. Want to go home? He whimpered. One of the demons walked over and kicked him. The crying became sniveling. Tear-rimmed eyes pleaded for help, full of fear and pain, and fastened on the one being that had not hurt him so far. Strangely, the boy's eyes made Raynor uncomfortable. He saw his pain, and something rippled beneath his cold skin. He felt swift anger at himself, at the demons who'd brought the child. Why should he care if another human died? Over the centuries, he'd killed thousands, hundreds of thousands. One of the demons dropped a lamp and grinned at Raynor as it crashed to the floor. Short in stature, the young one had donned skin the color of dark chocolate, and a gaze that glittered with hatred. Being one himself, Raynor could see the real demon behind the facade, its true form having scaly, Stygian skin, huge clawed feet, and two sharp tails. Its eyes were ebony stones, and its teeth were sharpened spikes. Damn, he'd liked that lamp. It had been elegantly expensive. The stockbroker would definitely miss it, which meant he had to either replace it or tweak her mind so she'd think she'd broken it herself. Or he could kill her. But the bottom line was, now Raynor had to move on. He didn't trust the trio in front of him, knowing where his sanctuary was. That made him the angriest. Was he losing his grip that such young ones could find him so easily? That they knew his name? Or had he been marked for termination because of his actions and what he'd been thinking lately? Had some of his older demon kin read his thoughts? Uh-oh. I don't want your peace offering, Raynor spat. He was watching the blubbering child who'd realized he wasn't going to get any help from him. I want you all out of here now. He pointed at the door, straightening to his full height, which was taller than any of the other demons. And take your meal with you. Oh, we're not leaving, Ancient One. You can't turn us out so easily, Greasy Hair said. We came here to pay you a visit, and visit we shall. The demon moved about the apartment, knocking things to the floor, walking on the shattered glass. It made crunching sounds beneath its clumsy feet. Nice pad. Much better than where we're living. Some abandoned, decrepit house on the outskirts of town. Mind us crashing here with you for a while? Yes, I mind. Get out. It had been a long time since he'd used his mind control against another demon, but he called on what he had and leveled burning eyes at the three, willed them to obey. Their minds were puny, and there was no hesitation. They left, dragging the boy behind them, with only their trance-like response reflecting their confusion. The leather-clad leader glanced over his shoulder, his expression baffled, as if to say, "Why am I doing this? You just wait, we'll be back." Rainer observed through the window as they herded the child down the street in the rain. The boy's eyes, peering up at him, were still begging. Poor human. So young. He'd be dead before the sun rose. Rainer experienced a rare twinge of guilt at the boy's face. Then shrugged.
Alexa, stop.
It was with
I
concern.
don't know what that alarm was
Humans
for.
were there to feed on, that's all. Young or old, what difference did it make when they died? They didn't live long anyway. But he'd killed no children recently. No, not in many years. The memory of the boy's pitiful face, those terrified eyes, continued to annoy him as he searched for and located another place to live. He couldn't shake it. It had never crossed his mind to save the boy. Why would he? So it irritated him that the memory wouldn't leave him. He found another place to live in a duplex across the street from St. Louis's Forest Park. He noticed the for rent sign on a stroll. The woods before him and the city behind appealed to him. It was a place to hide and to hunt all in one. A perfect spot. Soon he had the landlady, a fleshy mortal with tinted hair and ferret eyes, thinking he'd already paid 6 months' rent in advance. And she fell for the rest of the fairy tale, that he was a reclusive writer, one of the many fake covers he used, who didn't like to be bothered during the day because he was working on his new novel. Under the guise of an eccentric writer, he got away with so much. He moved in, but didn't meet the young woman next door until he bumped into her late that night. She was coming home around 2 a.m. as he was leaving. He'd made himself invisible to human eyes, but she saw him. She actually
There we are,
saw him. That was the first
everybody
shock.
that
The second
could possibly
was what
watch
she
this,
saw,
as well as
looking
Abigail.
directly and
Hopefully
said,
you
"What are you? You're
do
not
like
a
that,
remnant,
because
but you
that
are
is the
a
first
human
coat done.
here."
Not going to
He
bother with
stared
any
at
other
her,
colour
mouth
or
open.
overcoat anything
He
now,
couldn't read
because
her
I'm going to let
thoughts
that
at
dry
all.
naturally.
Not a glimmer.
Because sometimes
And
if
then
I
he
try
read.
it, overheat it, something
He read
becomes
saw
soft.
her sharp eyes,
But I do have other things
special
that I need to paint
hoping she
before
hadn't
the
seen him
part is
come from
over.
the
So
adjacent house.
let's these little
Didn't know what
compliments
he
that are going to be
was,
sitting,
and
one's
that
going to be
she
sitting up on
unsettled
his
And all
wings
her
there,
thought had
because
been
it did go around his neck, but every time I made it for his neck,
involved so much that
it
now
snapped.
some of them
So
could see him when he didn't
I'm
want
gonna
them
sort of
Humans,
paint this now.
seeds, and
But
other
other than
invisible-
that, that's all the
to. A
painting that I
sarcastic
can do.
snort.
Hopefully you like the colours. Let me know in the
Change
comments
things.
down below if you're
Truth
watching
was,
back or if you're
She
watching
was
live.
intrigued.
Let me know in the
He
comments what you
sensed
think.
something different in her than in any other human he'd ever met. She was surrounded by this rainbow aura of pulsating light that he'd never witnessed
Because
before.
I'm getting some brown
And for a human, she had courage.
staff, I think,
Showed
and
no
chain. I'm
fear
going to try and make
whatsoever when
brown,
she
make a
saw
golden
him.
brown, yeah?
There'd been caution, yes, but no fear.
Oh, excuse me,
As
with
if
brown.
She
Oh.
dealt with his kind before. Odd. He couldn't stop thinking about her. It had been a long time since anyone had touched him in any way, and she had, in the dark, notwithstanding the scars on the side of her face her hair was meant to hide. He'd seen she was young and tall for a human female. Her voice had been husky. Strength hid behind her movements, as fluid as an athlete's or a dancer's. Shoulder-length hair shone softly in the moonlight. Her eyes glistened deep with secrets. He saw all that and more. The dark hid nothing because he drew power from the night. After the encounter, he'd returned to skulk through the shadows around the two-story building he saw her go into, trying to peek in. But the blinds were drawn, and he wasn't sure which part of the house she was in. Other people lived there. He could sense them, so he couldn't run in and drag her out. Not that he wanted to. It'd be foolish to cause trouble close to his new residence when he didn't want to find another apartment. He liked his rooms, the location, so he went on his way. He had time. Unwise or not, he had to get to know the woman next door better. Find out if she could actually see his kind, and how. Then he'd decide what to do. Chapter 3. Manasseh. He'd been told the demon that had stumbled into Cassandra on the street went by the name of Raynor, though that wasn't its real name, and he was not to interfere with any of its dealings. But Manasseh knew he had to do something. The Ancient Ones were trouble. They had great strength and were unpredictable. Raynor, one of the oldest of them, was extremely clever. The meeting hadn't been an accident. If Manasseh wasn't careful, the demon would steal Cassandra away to the other side, and that couldn't happen, or the demon would kill her. Manasseh wasn't sure exactly how strong Raynor was, but he couldn't take the chance that the fiend wouldn't be able to harm the woman. She hadn't yet come fully into her own, though her abilities were growing rapidly. It only puzzled Manasseh that Raynor hadn't struck. Not that he'd succeed. Cassandra didn't know it, but she could probably take care of herself, even against such a formidable adversary. She'd soon have powers she couldn't currently imagine.
A little bit more there
She wasn't ready yet.
on the bottom. And I think
She hadn't
that's
seen or accepted her destiny. The world, still fairly
doing all right
secure
with
and
the gold
sane,
colour.
hadn't altered enough. Soon that would change. The enemy was preparing to
base
launch a
colour.
full assault.
Because this will look a
All
lot
the rules
different when it's
established over the
dry,
millennia were about to fall away.
as all paints
And the
do.
first thing they'd do would be to track
But no
down
one
their
wants to
enemy's
watch paint
best
dry.
warriors.
Even though there is a pretty good
Strongest and
playlist in the
special
background. It's
of
8
all the
hours.
humans.
So that one's probably
And
going to be what we'll listen to next time.
Eradicate them in
or
any
tomorrow.
way they could before the final confrontations began. And they had begun. More humans were vanishing every day. The death toll increased every week. Before long, it would be a bloodbath, and even the mortals would notice. Manasseh had to be vigilant. Nothing must happen to those in his care. But of all of them, Cassandra was the most important, and would be in the greatest danger if the other side discovered her existence too soon. Standing by the tree in the streetlight's glow, the leaves hiding him, he watched Cassandra leave her apartment for work that evening. The demon, Raynor, lounged in the doorway of the house next door, his coal-red eyes also on the woman. The humid air was heavy, with a scent of coming rain, and the sky murky under a canopy of swift and menacing clouds. Another squall.
They say you heard the same thing I just did.
In these times, storms, floods, hurricanes, and earthquakes would become more volatile. Turbulent weather, such as the world had never seen. This was the beginning of the end. This was mild. Cassandra got in her car and drove away. He wrestled with knowing he should follow, protect her, but he needed to check on Obadiah, another human in his care. The man was facing a new crisis, and Manasseh was concerned about him. Tonight, Obadiah would learn that his business had failed. His shop, the center of Obadiah's solitary life, had been losing money since the new mall with the Walmart had opened. And once the plummeting economy
Yeah.
kicked in, it would be all over.
Critic,
Over the
paint,
books and the bill so the
Not
vehicle
fail.
is paid.
I do like that.
He
That
finally
looks
accepted
okay for the
business
first coat.
closed.
Hopefully
And the
you
next
do
step was
too.
his final
I'm going to
bath
pause the
would be
playlist
taken.
here so I don't lose it. And I will definitely come back tomorrow and give you another coat and see, you can see what it looks like. But for now, I can give you a quick zoom in on the live camera. Can't really give you a zoom in, but I can in other ways on the PS4 because I'm going to pick that up and do that. But yeah, there's the original picture. And that's what it's looking like so far. I put the hood over the eyes because the eyes look absolutely horrendous. But he has his little staff thing there and holding in his hand. And then on the wings. Tried on the back here to try and cover up on the wings there to sort of understand why he was wearing a hood. And some cloth on the back. Did do a sash, but that keeps falling off and keeps snapping the bloody thing. Here's the other piece of the sash. I just like whatever. Snapped off. Lovely jubbly. There's his tail. And we got a splash on there again. That's why I did a base coat, because I knew where to get bits touched by other colours for the obviously slapped down base coat. And the green lizard. And look down there to give it a spin again. Green lizard. You can pick some colours. I might use purple. I'm not sure yet, but yeah, there's the little lizard thing, and well, there we go for the little necklace type thing for his wing, because I couldn't get it to stay around his neck. There's his staff, like it does in the other picture. But for now, guys, hopefully you have enjoyed yourself. Come back tomorrow. Unless you're watching backwards, or if you're watching on the PS4, thanks for watching. See you in the next episode. Bye for now. Click the links that will appear, and I'll see you in the next one. There'll be some more Minecraft uploads, so check those out. Otherwise, art in the Creation Station. Bye for now.